Okay, question 4 is one from America on their key issue. Does ability grouping affect anxiety? Do pupils get some relief knowing they're amongst people who move roughly at the same pace, or does that cause anxiety for some? Have you any thoughts on that one, Sue?
Wow. It raises so many questions. So as I understand it, there are some cultures where you do ability stream that if you like, you've got this normal distribution of some kind of measure of mathematics progress, and you might imagine doing something slightly different for the top and the bottom tails, as it were, because they might need a little bit of extra resource. But in the middle, they put everybody in together. And the reasoning behind that, I think, is what on earth is an ability stream, an ability group. It tends to be implemented by, you do a maths test and you allocate kids by the scores on the maths test. But the point is that different youngsters have different strengths as they're growing. They might have developed more skills in geometry, they might have developed more skills in algebra or in number. And so ability isn't a fixed thing for starters. It does make me feel that there's lots of fixed mindset thinking going on. And what we need here is growth mindset. Way back when the IQ was first developed, the originators of Binet particularly understood that what we were doing was identifying some kids who needed more support to get to the same place as others. So I suppose what ability grouping does is it carries a message of fixed mindset, and the idea that those youngsters are only going to ever achieve a G or a C or whatever. And so it probably reinforces one of our biggest problems in maths education. Whereas if you have the middle population all just working together on the mathematics, you don't have that constant reinforcement of fixed mindset. But in reality, I haven't been focused on the issue of ability grouping. I know Joe Bowler has. I've been much more focused on raising people's awareness of the impact of anxiety.
Shall I talk a bit then, and you reflect on what I say and see if we can try and make sense of this together? Because I've been struggling with this over the years, and I'm really...
Yes, indeed, that would be really interesting.
So I have come to the conclusion that you should never fully commit to one or the other. Mm-hmm. So if you think about the missing rung on the ladders picture, if you've got children where some of them have got that missing rung on the ladder, you want to be able to pull those children out and work with them. And if that means doing some ability setting or something along those lines for a while to do that, then that's what you need to do to fix that rung on the ladder and turn that around. But I wouldn't want to see that permanently in, because then children, as you say, miss out on so much. They end up in a low set and they've got no future in maths, and that changes everything. So I think the best way forward, you have to think about the skill sets of the teachers who are working with these children. So if you pick a topic, I was doing this week, I was doing areas of rectangles. Now, if a teacher had introduced that topic and said, you know, to find the area of the rectangle, you multiply the length by the width. So if that is 8 centimeters and that is 5 centimeters, what's the area of the rectangle? The children are confident with multiplication would fly with that, because they've just been told what to do and they can do it, so they're off and running. But if a child is scared of multiplication, you've lost them. Now, what I was doing instead was I was giving them some rectangles. I was giving them their size of rectangle measuring device, which was the squared paper, explaining that it's about how many squares a rectangle covers to find its area, and sending them to the window so they could put these up against the light. You can't see it very well with this much light, but if you put this in the window, you can see those squares beautifully, and any child can count them. And then we were building up, they were writing what the width was, what the length was, and what the area was. I was showing them the notation for all those things, building their confidence with using rulers, with understanding area as being square centimeters, and the notation for that, building all that confidence. And then I would give them something like this. And we would talk about this. So what's the area of this rectangle going to be? And someone would say, oh, it's going to be 40. How did you know that? Oh, because it's 5 rows of 8, which is 5 times 8. And we'd build that up. And then I would set the children questions that, with a variety of questions, and try and get them to take the ones that are challenge for them. So we'd go, 2 by 3 rectangle for the children who are most scared, and a 2 by 10 and so on, 7 by 10. But then going up to things that are pretty much long multiplication. And it's just, I've taught them to zone in and pick the questions that are right for them. So we haven't set up that maths anxiety. Every child is thriving. It's the classic low floor, high ceiling lesson. We've gone from a very simple thing, that every child can do by using context, and low floor, high ceiling lessons are created with either with context, a context that everyone is involved in, or with pictures and structures that everyone can access and play with. And by making it a low floor, high ceiling lesson, every child is engaged. But it doesn't always work. And if your culture has got stuck and the behavior is going bananas, it can be really good to change it for a while. And as children get older, often a lot of them are targeting a particular exam. And it's nice to pull off the ones who are targeting a particular qualification into groups so they can work on that together, because they're tuning into life. And as life goes on, often people want to learn the skills of acquiring a particular maths qualification.
I'm interested to compare this with, for example, a karate philosophy.
Go on.
So what they do with karate is they spend some time as a whole group together, building the belonging and the relatedness and the sense of identity, as everybody is part of the karate family. And then some of the time they go off into small groups to work on a particular thing that's needed for the next belt up. And they practice that particular skill. But there is that time spent in that whole community. We're all learners of mathematics, we're all learners of karate. What you just described, Rebecca, if I go back to Ryan and Decky and their sense of what's needed to enable learners to learn safely, there are 3 ingredients. There's autonomy, relatedness, and competence. And what you've described is a lesson where you make sure that everybody has the basic competence. They then have the autonomy to choose a level of activity that's challenging for them. And you've built that sense of relatedness and trust and belonging, because we're all working on the same topic with a low floor, high ceiling topic. And so everybody is learning something in those lessons, and yet everybody is also feeling that they're kept safe in that whole lesson. So
I've worked with mixed attainment classes up to age 16, and I've done that by using either pictures or a practical context as a starter for the lesson, generally. And then asking children to have a go at some questions and picking the ones that are the right level for them. But then I've had technology in those classrooms, so I've had them working on individualized learning systems and get them picking lessons that are right for them and navigating their way through the building blocks of maths and accessing their missing rungs in the ladder and tackling them and looking after them like that. But then I would change that around completely, and I'd have them setted within my class almost and working on different things in different lessons.
But the notion that just because you're in a set means that the kids are all at the same stage is nonsense. Yeah. It's too crude, and I think it creates lazy thinking, because within any group you still have mixed attainment and mixed backgrounds and mixed missing rungs, and you still have to give activities that give learners a sense of autonomy and a sense of competence. So I think whether we go for ability groups or mixed groups, we still have to avoid that lazy thinking that says you can put a child in a box and make an assumption that because of one score on a test, you've understood what's been learned and what hasn't. Yeah, it
and
doesn't
the other
work that
thing I
way.
see in the way that I work with children, when I teach them as mixed ability groups and treat them as just having odd missing rungs on their ladder rather than being in a particular place, I see children suddenly make 3 years of progress in
absolutely
dissolve from you being at one level to being an astronomically higher level. It's just like bang, they're off like a rocket. But then I have to step beyond myself here and acknowledge, you know, I've got this skill set in working with children, and a lot of teachers haven't had that training and haven't got that skill set, so the answers for them might be different because they are relying on schemes of work. If you're not a highly skilled maths teacher and you're in the early phase of your career, often the best thing for you is to rely quite heavily on a scheme of work, because it's teaching you a lot and you're learning at an amazing speed. But in order to cope with that, you may need to be given a class of children who are able to engage with where that scheme of work is and where you're teaching them. So those decisions may need to be made for you to support with you.
The most important thing, in addition, for an early career teacher is to learn to listen to the young people they're trying to teach.
Listening to what they're thinking and what they're saying, not for a particular answer or a particular strategy. Yeah, not listening for.
And really learning to hear what the barriers might be, because they're all hidden, the barriers. We make assumptions about a group of learners that are in front of us, and we don't know what those barriers might be, whether it's missing rungs or whether it's anxiety, whether it's a lack of self-belief. There's all sorts of possible barriers there. Or in one case she's acting out, and it turns out that she's the carer of her mum at home who's dying of cancer. So anxiety doesn't cover everything, but it does give us a framework for checking out.
Oh yes, I was looking at some children trying to understand them in terms of maths anxiety, and then suddenly another teacher would just tell me, oh, they've had a relationship breakdown, and this is nothing to do with maths anxiety. They're presenting with maths anxiety because of other things that are going on in their life. It's such a wake-up call, because it's so often.
So it's only part of our armoury, but as I say, given that we're talking high levels, because this has been written about since the 50s, when the governments of the Western world decided we needed to include algebra, and didn't. As far as I understand it, didn't do a lot of training about how to introduce algebra safely. Since then, we've had quite a lot of writing about maths anxiety, and nobody has taken it seriously enough at policy level. I think that's the problem. So we've had the 70s and the 90s where it's been discussed, a lot of wisdom has been gained. For example, let's not leave primary school teachers with maths anxiety, let's actually tackle it. Let's not leave resit students with maths anxiety, let's tackle it so they learn how to tackle it before they start their GCSE course, learn to recognise it, learn how to deal with it.
Certainly going on in the noughties as well. It just, in England.
So now we've got ridiculously high levels across the world of maths anxiety. And I can tell you that if you teach maths well, I've got a lovely example of a teacher from Kenya who came and did her PhD with me. And by introducing the scaffolding, which in this case was through software, grid algebra, which you're probably familiar with, she had those year sevens running to algebra lessons.
Yeah,
and the teachers around her were so surprised.
Intervention groups, and they're really shocked as well. They didn't expect this to happen. The kids just love it because they thrive in my lesson. And none of the children I'm working with have maths anxiety once I couldn't talk about this once we're more than about 6 weeks in, because it's all turned around and sorted out, because I know.
So they still have that propensity to get anxious that they need to be aware of, but it's not triggered in your lessons anymore. Yeah.
It can still float around. And of course, like I said, when I was working with the girl with the homework, one of the things I'm aware of is their need to be confident outside of my classroom and in other
Yes.
situations, and independent, and I'm always working with all of that too.
And that's what's nice about these tools I'm proposing, that you can implicitly work with maths anxiety like you do, like Gay Williams does in Australia, and learners can learn implicitly that they can be safe in maths. But actually, if we give them the language of the red zone and the relaxation response and the hand model of the brain, then they can learn to recognise away from us when they've been triggered. And actually, it turns out that they can use those skills in other domains as well, because it's not just maths that triggers anxiety. You can have writing anxiety, you can have music anxiety, anyway, where you've had a set of bad experiences of exclusion or humiliation. And it's nice to equip the learners with these tools. But what we have discovered is it doesn't work when you equip them with general tools and then send them into the maths lesson. Because we've had responses from teachers that say this, that we learn emotional intelligence in the school and then we have maths. And because of this culture of maths is difficult, maths is exclusionary, maths is abstract, and lots of people can't do it, the fixed mindset culture, people don't apply these same thinkings to those maths lessons. But if you start it in the maths lesson, and then it spreads, then they'll apply it to other domains, which is quite interesting finding.
So when they learn to get out of this anxiety zone back into this in maths, those are human skills and life strategies that they'll say, yeah, it is, isn't it?
Yes.
What a lovely note to conclude this on. Such a positive thing. Is there anything else you want to say before we finish off? For me,
no, I'm sure we can have further conversations. I love talking with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue.